Welcome, everyone, to episode 84 of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the All Things Charles Band podcast that is somehow both unoriginal and trite. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, a podcast host who can kill a man just by looking at him. But I'm not the only one who is returning to the wonderful town of Oblivion. Who else is here with me?
Well, I'm Steve Guntley, and they are all ladies because I say so. And this is the podcast about space dandies, banana garters, and screaming turtles. That's because this is a podcast about Backlash, Oblivion 2, a return to Sam Irvin's fun and campy little sci-fi Western world that we established in one of our earliest episodes, I think episode 4. And here we are 80 episodes later. And it just so happens that we found the guest from that original episode who is back with us once again. Who is here with us today, Jared?
Yes. While we're returning to the town of Oblivion, it would be wrong of us if we did not ask our original guest to join us again. He is an author, podcaster, host of the very fun Barstool Film School podcast, which we were on one time and had an absolute blast talking about Dream Warriors. And yeah, he's back again to take a little stroll into the town of Oblivion. It's Dylan James Quarles. Dylan, been a while, man. How are you, and what have you been up to?
Well, I have to say, guys, I was hot stuff back in those days. Not the cool cat you see now. That's a little ref for the movie. For those,
I'm glad you cooled down.
Oh, I wrote that one down. I actually ended up writing down quite a bit of Miss Kitty's monologue there because it was unbelievable. But
yeah.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on. This is kind of, I feel like it's almost been like a long time coming. Jared, I won't put you on the spot, but you did bump me a couple of times, and I'm still nursing a grudge about that. So I might have to call my good friend Sweeney to call in a debt here.
Sweeney.
Not Sweeney. Not Sweeney. But yeah, no, it's great to be back. This show
You're
is
absolutely
one of my
right.
faves.
I did, and I knew I could abuse your good graces and ask you to move our episode back so I can slot some first time guests in. But here we are, and it has been a while. So, you had we talked the first time you were on about some books that you'd published and stuff, but you've had quite an interesting, 15, 16 months, however long it's been since we recorded. What has been going on with you?
Yeah, it's funny. We talked, us Castle Freaks and Barstool Film School friends here, we talked like last Halloween. So we really are racing up on about the year mark since we last talked. Because like you mentioned with Dream Warriors, that was one of our Halloween episodes. So,
yeah.
In that time, lots been going on. Last September, I got a funny little phone call from my former publisher telling me that somebody had come and given him a card. They were a filmmaker. They wanted to talk to me. So I followed up with all that, not really knowing what to expect. And it turned out they were legitimate filmmakers. And they wanted to option the rights to one of my short stories, Secret History of Port Townsend, Volume 1. And so I was like, hell yeah, because fucking yeah, right?
Yeah,
that's what any author with like half a brain, if they're real and they want to give you money, for a certain period of time to try to get something going with one of your books, you say yes, please.
Absolutely.
So I said yes, please, and yeah, we just kind of started a dialogue around that, and then pretty soon the dialogue shifted to like, would you be interested in writing the screenplay? Because we get the feeling from your writing that you have a background in film, and I'm like, oh, funny you should mention that. I went to film school, so yeah, I'll take a crack at it. And it's just been a whirlwind working with these folks who have been, I know that Hollywood people get a bad rap, but these seem to be some very ethical and cool and on the level folks, because they have been doing, the one in particular that I speak with the most has been like a real like mentor, like through this whole process of screenwriting and like how, through the various drafts of the screenplay and the way the project has sort of evolved and grown like bigger than I could have ever imagined. And some of the numbers and stuff that they throw around, it's just unbelievable to hear. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And if any of your listeners are like kind of interested in getting some context, like I said, Secret History of Port Townsend is the series, and they went ahead and optioned the rights to the rest of the series as well, because they were feeling so confident after the screenplay got turned in that there was, a little franchise potential here. So yeah, I mean, keep your eyes peeled for 2025, that's when we're supposed to be starting production. I'll let you guys know, obviously, how that goes. I'll keep you appraised throughout the production, and maybe we can make something happen when I'm like a real deal big shot, and you won't have to bump me for first time guests, Jared, because I'll be a real somebody.
That's amazing. That's really exciting. I mean, for somebody to kind of like single out your story and highlight it for that, that's pretty amazing.
And like tell you things like about your story that you didn't necessarily like things that they connected with, things that where their mind went as a creative, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, yes, of course I did that on purpose. Of course, yes, I'm glad you picked up on that. Like it's like that. Yeah, like my old like film school brain kicked back in, was like, oh yeah, here's how you like when the professor says this is what you meant, right? You're like,
yeah. Yeah, no, I've had people respond to things I've written like that too. It's always a trip because like you assume as a reader that like all of this shit is intentional, like they're putting these layers in here, these things that I'm responding to, that's in the subtext, the writer's thinking about it. Most of the time the writer's not thinking about it.
Yeah, well, they've got their own subtext they're working on, and that's the beautiful thing about it. And I will say with the difference between writing a screenplay and narrative fiction, the whole it's been really cool, freeing, challenging, everything all together. But like kind of what you're talking about there, Steve, is like you get to like leave so much room for other creatives to bring that their creativity into the project. Like, there's things that need to be in the script in order for it to like make sense. But then there's like a lot of like wiggle room where you don't maybe want to control the descriptions too heavily, or like certain stuff about the character too heavily, because, the person that's reading that script, more than likely that's going to be involved in the project, is also really creative and imaginative. And it's not like, as a narrative writer, you hope your readers have great imaginations. You hope that they're just ready to picture the world in full color, but you can't guarantee that. So you kind of got to do a lot of that scaffolding for them in order to make sure that it all comes across.
Yeah.
Across varying levels of sort of readership and imagination and all these things. But with the screenplay, it's like you almost got to, somebody like me, I get accused of being a little purple sometimes with my prose. I gotta like pull it back to like, leave room for these other people who have all this crazy artistic vision to put that there, which I love. It's cool. It's collaborative. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Well, if we're going to speak about leaving room for artistic ambitions,
I'm excited
let's talk about Backlash Oblivion too. So Steve, why don't you fire off some stats about this movie?
Absolutely. So Backlash Oblivion 2 was released April 2nd, 1996. It's directed by Sam Irvin, written by Peter David, and it stars Richard Joseph Paul, Jackie Swanson, Andrew Devoff, Musetta Vander, George Takei, Julie Newmar, Meg Foster, Maxwell Caulfield, Jimmy F. Skaggs, Erwin Keys, and Carol Stroiken. Now, this is a little bit of an unusual episode for us because we kind of sort of covered this movie. We talked about it in detail during our interview with director Sam Irvin, who came on to talk about Oblivion 1 and 2.
Right.
We kind of covered the whole thing. And it's kind of inescapable that you have to talk about both because they were filmed at the exact same time.
Yeah.
It was just a misfortune of timing that led to these being released so far apart. The first Oblivion was released in late 1994, and this is early 1996. So there's a big old gap between them. And that's because Oblivion, and sometimes the timing gets a little squishy and the release dates gets a little squishy sometimes, but I believe Oblivion is the last film released under the Paramount deal. The beginning, the first phase of Full Moon, kind of the canonical one that a lot of people really glommed onto, that ends with the first Oblivion. And then they're in a little bit of a wilderness period for about a year or two where they're figuring out where they're going to land. They very, very, very briefly landed with Disney, which is weird. Well, at least they landed through Buena Vista Releasing. They released exactly one movie under that. It's called Demon in a Bottle. And I think it was ultimately changed. Now, I had to look that up to make sure this was not a reference to the classic Iron Man arc where he confronts his alcoholism. It's not about that.
No, I thought it was about a genie.
Yeah,
I was getting ready for you to say Iron Man versus the Djinn, and I was like, whoa, I need to read that one.
I thought you were just going to tell our listeners that it wasn't a Christina Aguilera biopic.
I'm a demon in a bottle.
I'm a demon in a bottle.
Behind the scenes of Christina Aguilera's tumultuous first album.
Yeah. I just imagine a Sean Parker figure coming in. It's like, I have one suggestion. Your song "Demon in a Bottle" is great. I just want to tweak one thing. Yeah, but so that was kind of where they Full Moon was at this time. And of course, in 1996, they ended up with Kushner Locke. And so Oblivion is kind of spanning those eras where we're going from the Paramount era to the Kushner Locke era. We've come to really appreciate the Kushner Locke era for just how cheap and weird it is. It is very unexpected. It's very bizarre. They take some huge swings during this period that makes it a lot of fun. Like, this is when Head of the Family comes out. This is when Castle Freak comes out.
I almost put that on the other night, by the way.
Oh, Head of the Family?
I was doing some Tubi cruising, as one does, and I was like, "Ooh!" I remember you guys covered that episode.
Nope.
Or have you not done
We
it
haven't
yet?
done
Yeah,
that one
we
yet.
just talk about it so
Okay,
much.
We talked about it a lot, and it's definitely my most rewatched Full Moon movie because it's a one I show it to a lot of people. It's like because it's just such a bizarre artifact. But I'm very excited to have an episode proper where we talk about that one. 'Cause
Wow.
there's a lot
And
to say.
this movie's weird too because it is in that Buena Vista period limbo, but it was distributed by Coke Vision,
Yeah,
which is like I think maybe like the only one in
now Coke
early
Vision in this
96.
case. Yeah, we're not referring to how Gary Busey saw the world in the 80s.
Yeah,
We are referring to KOCH. But it's also not those Koch brothers. It's a different, it's a different distributing. So
I didn't notice a lot of like like fracking and just like, I mean, there is a lot of like to do about extracting minerals and desecrating native, burial grounds and stuff. So I could see a case being made for the Koch brothers.
Absolutely.
Throwing their weight behind this one.
Again, we're talking about the subtext that like we understand is there, but they don't know it's there.
Yeah.
But, so I think for a lot of people, like a lot of people, even if you're a fan of the first movie, you probably don't know the second one exists, like because it was caught in that weird distribution bubble. It was at a transitional period in the medium, and so this movie didn't get as wide of a release as the first one, which already didn't get that wide of a release.
It also suffered budgetarily. Like you can look at these two movies were made back to back or simultaneously almost, but you can sort of see that when they were doing a lot of stuff simultaneously, but I think when it came to maybe some of the effects and things they needed for the final act of this movie, that's where the budget sort of ran out.
The spaceships and stuff, even.
Yeah.
I mean, that first Oblivion opens with that great shot of the spaceship. It's it's cheap and you see it again, which I really appreciate the previously on. I thought that was a nice, really enjoyed that. It was a good refresher. But
I did appreciate that. Yeah.
Weenie spaceship in this one is pretty dicey. And I could see that being a budgetary deal for sure.
You talked about the previously on, and it's worth mentioning that this is on paper an 83-minute long movie, but it opens with a 10-minute previously on recapping the first movie. Then there's 5 minutes of credits and another 5 minutes of end credits. So that kind of wears us pretty thin. This is a 63-minute movie when all is said and done.
Beautiful.
Which I think speaks to the fact that maybe this wasn't necessarily meant to be two movies. Maybe this was meant to be one longer movie, and some of these are like deleted scenes or kind of alternate paths they could have gone. But Sam Irvin, when we talked to him, said that they did film these back to back. They just kind of kept everybody around for another week or two, and they knocked out both movies. But it does feel a little thin for a whole movie itself. But what this made me realize, like watching this in a 1 hour long like episode format, this really made me wish that Oblivion had been picked up not as a movie, but as a syndicated TV show of hour-long adventures every week. You slot it in on a late, deep Sunday night slot between Mutant X and VIP, and I think that's exactly where this lives. I think this would be perfectly fun and ideal in this scenario because it has kind of like Xena-ish vibes, doesn't it? Like, I don't know if I picked up on that the first time around, but watching it this time, I mean, this feels straight up like the Sam Raimi like made for syndication TV shows.
Well, the first Oblivion felt less. We talked about how we thought the concept and the sets and the costuming and the character design and everything, and it being this weird isolated location, were all hallmarks maybe of a potential syndicated series. But I feel like the first movie felt less like the pilot of a show, as this one, when you trim away the previously on in the credits, feels just like a second episode of a show.
Yeah.
It really does. Yeah, this has big second episode vibes because
Or
it's like
third episode if your first episode is a two-parter.
exactly.
And it's like now we're settled in and we can kind of get to the stuff with like Maddie and the Marshal and then the romantic stuff that's going on there. And then like the cyborg wants to be more human. But then all these things sort of get dropped a little as the movie gets chugging in the way that would happen with the third episode of a syndicated television show. And then maybe they're going to come back in episode 5 or 6. You'll get more of the cyborg. You'll get more, over here, over there.
And it's shifting focus the way a TV show does, right? Like you'd be watching this and be like, oh, okay, this is a Miss Kitty episode.
Yep.
Like, or this is kind of like split bill Miss Kitty and Lash episode, really. Like, because I think
here comes Sweeney. Sweeney's coming in with a literal top hat and monocle, and he's like, "Hello, show, I'm stealing you now." And
absolutely, yes. Put that man on charges. I think Maxwell Caulfield is a lot of fun in this movie as Sweeney. I love the basically one scene. We're going to reveal this and then never talk about it again. Reveal that he's actually a space Gorgon of some kind. He's got a giant lizard head. He looks like the Gorn from Star Trek with antlers.
Amazing.
Yeah, he's wearing like Homer Simpson's 1974 prom tux.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that the top hat getting knocked off was like, that was like what set him off. I have in my notes when Sweeney shows up that because it's like a lot to do. It's like, oh, we're hearing about Sweeney. Everybody's like, oh my God, Sweeney. Have you heard about Sweeney? It's like, and then when he finally shows up, I just write, Sweeney is a foppish British guy. I hate him, but I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
At first I'm just like, oh, this guy. And then everybody's like, oh, this guy. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. We're all on the same page. Then we can do this.
Yeah, and I want to give props to Maxwell Caulfield in this movie because I'm not, by nature, a huge fan of his in the limited work I've seen. I'm not one of those huge Grease 2 defenders, which I know exist now.
Well, I'm not. I think I need to leave. Yeah,
I'm not a fan of Empire Records, which people will tell you that movie is good and they're wrong.
Yeah.
And I'll see quotes about it's Rex Manning Day, and I'm like, this is not iconic. Stop posting this. And the funny thing is that like, for the Rex Manning character, Maxwell Caulfield is like his hair's grown out a little longer and he's got a fake tan that's really prominent.
Is he doing kind of like a Neil Diamond thing a little bit?
Yes, but that was filmed only like a year and a half after this.
Wild. No way.
Yeah, he looks like he looks like the aging Empire Records.
He looks like the aging guy. Like he's like over the hill music sensation.
Yeah, I think that's what he's kind of meant to be.
Totally. But he's like at the top of his game in this.
But he's young because he was only like 22 or something when they shot Grease 2. And then it was only about 12, 13 years later that he was making these movies. I think in this movie he's only 35.
Something like that. Yeah, I think at this point he's best known for being on Dynasty, I think. Not like a huge arc, but I think that everybody was watching Dynasty. So I think he kind of popped off of that, but he was never like a huge name, but I think he's really well suited for this role. And it's
he's handsome and he seems to get what he's doing. He seems to understand the mission, He's dialed
into the camp of this thing, which I would say everybody is. I mean, it really was such a treat to kind of come back into this universe, because this is one of the full moon movies that is just the most dedicated to fun. Like it's not trying to be scary. It's not trying to be profound. It's just kind of like, let's get a bunch of sort of, let's say, affordable character actors from a lot of genre fiction around the time. Let's let them loose in this scenario. They get to have a lot of fun. They get to make some big character choices. Yeah. Everybody feels pretty dialed into what they're doing here. And it's just a good mashup, It's a silly, pulpy little mashup of like classical cowboys, like the way you think of the Old West, that's what you get. The way you think of science fiction, that's what you get. And you just mash them together, and it's perfectly fun and entertaining.
Yeah, I don't want to use a descriptor like better per se, because I know the first movie had more of the budget, and there's some more impressive stop motion effects in the first movie. And Night Scorps, exactly.
The Night Scorps, yeah.
So there's things about the first movie that I think this one doesn't necessarily have, but I will say this is funnier than the first movie.
I told you, Jared, in a private text. Sorry, Steve, I don't have your number.
That's all right.
We can fix that. I told you, Jared, that I actually enjoyed this one more than the first one, which I did enjoy. And go back to that episode and listen if you're new to the show, because it's a good time. But I I really, something about this one just clicked for me. And maybe as you guys were talking about this whole idea of it being syndicated television, something, like I went through a phase in college where I rewatched Hercules.
Oh yeah.
And it was like early binging days because it was actually from some probably totally illegal website that doesn't exist any longer. And it was just like you just could go episode by episode with no commercial breaks. And so I watched, like an entire season of Hercules in a couple of days. And this was very much reminding me of that. Like you get these characters, they come and they go, and they're all so overblown because they have to compete with your main characters and the main premise of the show. And in this case, the movie. So it was kind of like, I almost felt like everybody was getting that piece of direction. And in a way, it made the movie work better for me. Like nobody was like, well, I'm just a background ancillary character or whatever. It's like, everybody's like, no, I'm the star of this week's episode. So I really need to like bring it. Like freaking George Takei. Like, I think he was told, you are the star of this film. So go, because
Right,
every scene he's in,
he's big, but he's in the movie less.
way
He's
less.
in the first movie, which is good. He's a heavy spice. It's good to have him sprinkled in. And I appreciate, Dylan, the way that you consumed all of that Hercules so that no money went to the estate of Kevin Sorbo.
Oh,
Yes,
no
yes.
money is going to Peanut. None for you, Peanut.
Yeah, well done. Well done.
Yeah,
on
but you're
pointing that
absolutely
one.
right. Hercules is a good example. Xena's a good example. Definitely, it's got those like Walker Texas Ranger or Renegade vibes to it also. And I found myself, when I watched the first Oblivion, I was like, oh, that was fun. We posited that this could be a cool syndicated series based on a lot of the elements of it. But with this one, I actually found myself, when it ended, being disappointed that we didn't have an episode 3.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
I want
yeah.
this to keep going.
Divoff comes back and then is like, I guess, squished by the giant turtle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wanted way more from Jagar and Lash, and I wanted to see more. And maybe, I don't know, you never know, right? I mean, all these people are still among the living, so
I think it would be funny if every new episode Andrew Divoff is coming back, but he's like the next brother. He's
well,
like,
lizards, I mean, we're
Jagar and
talking-
Red Eye were the foolish brothers. I am Glor, the handsome one. And each week he
Yes.
just shows up and he's like doing the same
no
thing.
lizard.
slightly
Is it- I
different.
mean, there's how many eggs did mom lay? I mean, come
Right?
on.
Yeah, we
could
don't
have
know. There's a whole
infinite-
clutch. We have no idea how they reproduce. Like maybe it's a spore-based system. We have no idea.
Oh, hey,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, well,
We can
Jagar is the
explore that.
smarter one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Introduced to him. So next time, we could get the more handsome one.
Yeah.
exactly.
Less
But
scraggly skin.
even
I
the
love
way
the,
they have Carol Struyken's character in here, Mr. Gaunt, who is in the first one, like we don't totally know what his deal is. He's just kind of this like
is he deaf?
figure.
Is he? Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's just like people seem to accept him as just kind of the local goth,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, that's Mr. Gaunt. He makes weird predictions about your death. He's a cool guy,
Yeah, he
like
drinks tea, man.
I like the way that he's just like a part of the community and everybody's
Yeah.
sort of like him, even though he's always like saying spooky shit. I love the central game that they have like with the hero and his girlfriend where the hero the whole thing with the first movie is that they're positing that this is a character who's too cowardly to be the sheriff, but it's not cowardly, it's that he's an intense empath and he feels physically the violence that he inflicts on other people. So any violence he does to somebody, he's doing it to himself, and he doesn't like that. So in this one, they're still playing up that game a little bit where he is kind of by necessity a little bit of a wimp, and his girlfriend is starting to get a little fed up with him because she wants it, like she's grown up in this tough old West town and wants him to be a little more like rough and tumble as well. And that's a fun game to set up, and it's a fun game to extend over the course of a series.
Yeah, she's basically like, please do sex to me. And he's like, no, I
this
can't.
Scene, their date. First, the way it's set up, where it's
Yeah.
like you think he's going to do like, high noon at the OK Corral, like
Yeah.
we're gonna do like a quick draw competition or something, but it's actually he's going to ask Miss Maddie out on a date. Then they go on the date, and he has this insane rant where he's just kind of recapping things from the first movie in case you missed him from that 5-minute opening. But then he's also just like talking like vague threats of like sexual assault, like you're a pretty woman and anything could happen to you out here. And it's just like he's going all over the map. And I'm just like, and I'm like thinking like these are the rantings of a lunatic. And she's just looking at him like, oh, just stop talking so I can kiss you. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like incredible direction and acting on both of their parts. Like this wild rant he goes on, and then she is just extremely DTF in spite of it.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
I mean, I think we brought this up the last time as well, but I kept seeing Oblivion being brought up on, like, I think it was covered on Riff Tracks, or like it was constantly being brought up as like a good bad movie or a fun bad movie or something like that. But like, I feel like people misunderstood that this is intentionally trying to be funny, and Backlash kind of emphasizes that, yes, no, this is a comedy.
I think. Yeah.
We know it's a comedy. Like this, we're not stumbling upon these funny bits accidentally. We are serving these up to you as comedy. And that's one of the things that always annoys me when people latch on to like a bad movie. It's like if they don't understand that it's in on the joke.
I think this one is more successful than the first one because a lot of these bits, these comedy bits, some of the most successful ones for me come in the form of these totally bonkers monologues.
Yeah.
That the characters are giving, like the one, you know, that the Marshal gives during his date and the one Miss Kitty gives later. Like these are wild things, and they're filmed in such a way as to really emphasize that, so that you are aware that this is crazy what you're watching. And then you have stuff like George Takei, you mentioned. It's an intense spice. That's a little bit more kind of like in line with like some of the comedic stylings of the first one, where it's like it's not quite coming across as overt comedy, so therefore I see where people can make the mistake of just being like, oh, this is just bad, and they're missing the comedy, because like there is some onus on the comedian to make sure that you're aware that a joke is being told. You know, this one I think does that more successfully. I don't know how, because it's the same director back to back, all these things you've been talking about. So it's just like something came together. Maybe everybody settled in more, and by the point that they were doing this movie, like the sauce, you know, had been mixed well or something. But yeah, this is a lot funnier, I think, than Oblivion 1, and more successful in most ways, even though it had less of a budget and less action.
I mean, I imagine this was kind of a result of the editing process. Maybe people saw the first one and like saw how it played, and then had time to sort of edit it in that direction and play
Well, it's really, I think it's pretty interesting that you bring up the editing of this movie, because the first movie was edited by Margaret Ann Smith, and in this movie, for the 65 minutes of it, that's Oblivion 2 proper. It's edited by Andy Horvitch, and he's someone who worked on a ton of Empire and Full Moon movies, Rawhead Rex, Prison, Pit and the Pendulum, like a lot of them. And it came from the video aisle. They highlight that, and they say there is a conscious effort for this to have a much sort of snappier pace than the first movie, so that editing is intentional in that way. And I think it does come across, because I do feel like you can't, I don't know, there's only so many ways you can do a previously on, because you're including stuff that's important to the plot and important to understanding who the characters are. And we know that it's sort of like in the recipe for a Full Moon movie to have a protracted opening and closing credit sequence. But for like the rest of the movie, that's the hour and 5 minutes or so, I do feel like this thing moves. Like, I feel like there are moments, like I loved in the first Oblivion the scene with the like arm wrestling scene with the little green guy.
Oh yeah,
it was so good. And we don't have a scene like that here, because again, that's another effect. That's another I don't know if that was a rod puppet or prosthetic, but whatever it was.
You get the giant turtle at least. You are getting little creatures at least in this movie. Well, big creatures. But I was kind of worried toward the end of the movie that we hadn't had one, and then that giant turtle thing showed up, and I was like, okay, phew. Like,
yeah. I mean, it gets a little complicated with the Miss Kitty of it all, and like all of the bounty huntering and all of this,
corporate espionage. And,
there's maybe a few too many elements in the pot, but it's all kind of in keeping with the spirit of the thing. I did enjoy that Musetta Vander kind of gets to take front and center here, because my God, is she just crunching on the scenery? I'm not going to argue that she's a great actress. You can see her work in Mortal Kombat Annihilation and things like that, and you can, draw your own conclusions. But she understands the character. She is committing fully, and she is making big choices. Like, it feels kind of like a drag performance, but from a straight woman.
But That's 100%. I agree with you, and she's one of my favorite parts of this movie. Like she was the first one. I will watch her and her chaps any day of the week. But the thing is, like, think about it's always in like the number one of like worst line readings and stuff of like the Mortal Kombat Annihilation. But like, isn't that movie a piece of shit? Shouldn't you play it big and dumb like that?
Yeah.
Like,
The movie is
Probably.
absolute garbage, and I do want to shout out. Okay, no, I'm not going to go down this route, but I just think the director of that movie does not get talked about as the worst filmmaker of all time, and he should be. And he didn't really get he got another crack at the bat with Annabelle in 2013, which wound up being a big hit. So he's directed a few films that you could really make the argument are some of the worst ever made.
Yeah.
I feel like I can almost get behind the acting choice there to deliver that line, because that line is written on the page. Like that's the script. Like she's not improvising, at least not to my knowledge.
No,
but like, yeah,
she's trying to put some mustard on it. Yeah,
right. And I feel like that's kind of how you should deliver a line like that. And it's not like, I don't feel like that would be something that stands out as like, oh, here's someone who's completely wooden. Like I remember when I saw a movie that I personally don't like, but I know a lot of people like, was the Clint Eastwood movie Gran Torino.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, when the Hmong people were talking, that was just a case of where we wanted authenticity and not actors, and it really showed because they could not really carry the weight of the scenes.
No.
And I don't feel like Mortal Kombat Annihilation is this like meditation on something, and then you have someone saying, "No, but I will kill you," or whatever the line is.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that seems to fit with how fucking dumb Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Right. It doesn't stop
should
the movie like it does. Like it's weird to hear Gran Torino and Mortal Kombat Annihilation mentioned in the same.
Oh, this is what we do on this show.
Castle Freaks. Yeah, you guys.
We've got like a big cork board with a lot of like threads and pins, and we're making connections that nobody's seen before.
I can see it in the background, Steve. The red thread is going everywhere.
I'm also trying to catch the Zodiac Killer, unrelated.
And
you'll notice behind me also, we're trying to figure out a way to get a conversation about the Apu trilogy in as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how yet, but
we'll find a way. We'll squeeze that in.
Maybe when I figure out who Pepe Sylvia is, I can, we can all coordinate together and we can figure this out. You mentioned there that whole idea of like people glomming on to bad line deliveries, looking at you, George Takei, maybe a little in this movie, some like you try to make that case in these movies, and it's sort of like, well, you're missing the point if that's what you're doing. A much more a one that's actually glaring. It's like what you mentioned in Gran Torino. I can think of others and other.
I think movies. I know which one you're going to say, but go on.
But like we're going to be covering on our program, so by the time this comes out, it will already have been covered. So if you're interested in hearing that conversation, go back and check us out. But we're going to do Troll 2. Yes, we're doing sequels this season. And they're eating her, and then they're going to eat me. Oh my God. That shows up on those YouTube super edits, super cuts too.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but have you seen the rest of the movie? Because really, in the context of the rest of that movie, like, you think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You know what I mean? It's like, this thing is chock full of these types of moments and deliveries. That one's not particularly worse than any of the others or more audacious. It's just the one that was the most sort of clippable.
Yeah. Much like a garbage day.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Or it's like, it always finishes like Musetta Vander is always number one, and this is always number two, but I don't know why they're even comparable when you talk about like Ryan O'Neal and like Tough Guys Don't Dance.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, why?
Oh, God. Oh, man. Oh, God. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
But I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff here. And I mean, yeah, I agree. It's good that they use a little less of George Takei, and I still love that he's channeling like future Nick Nolte for his performance here. It's like really,
he had a crystal ball.
Like it's really fun. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have a good time with this universe. I think these are movies that I will kind of go back to. These are good. Like, not a lot of full moon movies could be considered good background movies, usually because light on dialogue, or maybe they're a little too dim or whatever, or you just sort of, they'll wash over you in one way or the other. I think these are good background movies in the same way that like a couple of episodes of Xena would be fun to have on in the background.
Yeah.
It has that energy, or you know what this would be great with? Double feature, or I'd pair it with like in the same time slot as Briscoe County Jr., the Bruce Campbell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
These are tonally, they would fit so well. It would be a fun, like, back to back of like revisionist Western goofiness.
It's got all that sort of send up stuff without getting too bogged down in the minutia of actually trying to make a really well thought out universe with like intense continuity that somebody could make, you know, an entire podcast dissecting the way all these things work, a la something like, you know, Battlestar Galactica or whatever, like, or Star Trek or something. This is like, it's cowboys, but there's also like a blue dinosaur guy in the background. That's fun. He's got a vest on. Like, you know, it's sort of like there's a spaceship, but it could just be a train. We decided it was a spaceship, but Sweeney could roll into town on a train. You know, like
why not?
John has this carriage, you know, and it's pulled by horses. So it is a carriage in every single sense of what a carriage is. And yet it has like this giant muffler on the back and like this like riverboat fan and all these like things just sort of stuck onto other things. So it's like we're just sort of being like, it's a Western, but also we want to have Divoff in lizard makeup. So just fucking roll with it. Okay. And we're like, all right, got it. Sweet. Let's do it.
All I can do now is imagine what the amazing crossover episode of this and Briscoe County Jr. would be.
Right. Exactly.
You can see it, right? It's in.
You can actually see it. They would fit into each other's worlds like perfectly well.
We keep talking about Xena and Hercules and stuff, and it's in the same way. It's like, okay, it's vaguely ancient Greece, but we kind of feel like we want to do a Terminator episode. So we're gonna have like a hell demon come from Hades that's like a liquid metal hell demon, and it'll just be our Terminator episode. Go with it, you know.
Go with it.
Like I would not be surprised if there was straight up an episode of Hercules that had aliens in it. Like a UFO landing and aliens would not surprise me.
Would not surprise me at all. No. Yeah. And, you know, this movie, both of these movies, you know, Sam Irvin is really well educated in these genre tropes. He's written a couple of books about like genre tropes and things like that. So he knows what he's playing with. It's written by Peter David, who is a longtime writer and editor at Marvel Comics. So he kind of knows the right energy to bring to this. It feels throwbacky, but it also just feels like it's celebrating nerd culture in a way that wasn't really happening around this time. Now, of course, we need to celebrate less nerd culture. The nerds have had their moment. Let's calm down. Let's let the jocks take over for a while. Yeah, right.
Well, it'll all be Van Wilder all over again.
Let's get more Van Wilders. Taj can keep rising. You know, like,
did he ever finish that rise?
I don't know if he ever did. I want to see the end of that.
So I had a question that you Castle Freaks and Puppet Masters could probably definitely answer for me, and hopefully you can, or else you'll have to edit this out.
Yeah.
This music, the composer for this film, I was really noticing the music because I was not treating it like a lot of the movies I watch for my program. I either watch them with the volume way down low or sometimes on mute, because the whole point of our show is like you're watching this movie in a bar and you're not going to hear you're not going to hear the audio because it's on behind the bar. But I was actually really paying attention. I was like, oh, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to like pay attention. So
you're asking us right now to comment on Pino Donaggio.
Yeah. So does he come in and do a lot of work in these?
Did we not talk about Pino Donaggio in the first episode?
I'm not sure we did.
An Oblivion one.
He was coming up a lot at the time.
I think he did a lot of
early Full Moon.
Yeah, I think we talked about him in the Tourist Trap episode, which was probably only a couple weeks after we covered Oblivion. But Pino Donaggio is a fantastic film composer.
He's one of our favorites. Yeah,
he has had an absolutely amazing career. He composed music for all of the stuff during like Brian De Palma's classic period, from Carrie to Dress to Kill to Blowout to
and of course, Body Double. Yeah,
his Body Double score is phenomenal. Tourist Trap, he did a bunch of early stuff with Charles Band, and then a lot of Full Moon movies, but he also, you know, he's popped up in other horror stuff as a composer, like in Seed of Chucky.
I love that movie.
It's fantastic.
I was curious. What stood out to me was, you know, most of my Full Moon, most of my experience with the Full Moon Empire revolves mostly around Puppet Masters, and kind of like those were movies I saw when I was a kid. I think I actually talked about this on my first time on the show. And the soundtracks on those have that, we're just doing synth violin, we're doing synth, you know, oboe. It's somebody with a synthesizer. And I don't, you know, disparage, but this had like depth, like quality. This sounded like a honest to goodness score. and not just like somebody noodling on a keyboard. And I thought it just like did a lot to heighten the quality of the picture.
Yeah.
And it just showed like how important that is to a movie. And I mean, like, this is, again, I've been watching too many movies on mute lately, that like I get zeroed in on, I think, things that are normally helped a lot by the score, or hurt in some cases. But yeah, he stood out, and I was like, this guy has to be somebody. And I held off from like looking on IMDb because I knew you guys would just know.
We're big fans of his work. You know, I
Mhm.
feel like he's doing a great riff on like the Elmer Bernstein Magnificent Seven score here, you know, so definitely like high adventure kind of cowboy stuff. I really like Pino Donaggio just because he never gives you exactly what you're expecting. He always finds some kind of weird little twist to put on everything. And I think he really does that here, while also keeping it feeling very fun and like accessible.
Well, he's also really, how should I say this? Like, he's very, like, his style of how he scores movies is very varied. Like, the Body Double score is a synth score.
Yeah.
But it's incredible. And it kind of sounds, it has those vibes of like Tangerine Dream or something like that. And it's amazing. But
it fits the picture.
yeah, I think he adapts to fit movies really well. Like his Tourist Trap score is an oddball sort of thing where there's all these weird sound effects and it's kind of off-putting, and it fits perfectly because you're dealing a lot with, you know, people getting their face molded into cement. You're getting not cement, into plaster. You're getting weird mannequins coming to life and all that stuff. But then, you know, if you really want a snapshot of kind of where he's really at his best, you can listen to the score during the prom scene in Carrie before the bucket dumps on her head. It's so remarkable. And then the scene in Dress to Kill, where Nancy Allen sees Michael Caine's character escape from the asylum and she's hiding in a bathroom. Just, you could check those two isolated scenes out and just get a sense of how amazing this guy is and how much he adapts to each picture.
I can perfectly picture that scene in Carrie. I can't I feel like I can almost hear the music, and it's perfect for that moment. It's dreamy. The music is like, is this a dream? And
He's
then
really
it's
good
like,
at
no,
that.
it's a nightmare, you know, and it's incredible. I didn't know that was him. I'm really glad I brought this up because I was curious when I was watching. I was like, this feels like this might be the biggest heavy hitter in this entire picture. Might be this guy.
It's cool. It's cool that like he and Charles Band worked together a lot early in his career. You know, and it's sad he didn't really stick with it. But I think, you know, Pino Donaggio has not really done a lot recently, right? He's kind of semi-retired. Am I wrong about that?
But yeah, he hasn't. He worked with a lot of Italian stuff too. So I mean, he, in terms of like mainstream American movies, he really hasn't been as prolific, but I think still worked a lot over the last, you know, 20, 30 years. But if you think you've maybe never heard a Pino Donaggio score before, in the movie Death Proof, the Quentin Tarantino Death Proof, he reuses a piece of music that Pino Donaggio wrote for Blowout, which is called Jack and Sally's theme, which is sort of like the sad love theme of that movie, and it's used in Death Proof and in a really interesting way. So you've probably heard some of his work. That might be what it is. I feel like you haven't.
Yeah. I'm getting like whatever the auditory version of like Proustian memory trips when I like hear. I'm like, this sounds like quality stuff right here.
Yeah,
almost incongruous with the fact that we're shooting on video right now.
Yeah, exactly. It feels higher edge, higher energy. You know, and then I think ultimately that's sort of what hurt Oblivion in the long run was just budgetary concerns. You know, this is all shot on a set in Romania, you know, which was common during this era of Full Moon. You know, they were shooting most of their stuff over in Romania.
Two quick things I have to get out before we continue. One, Dylan, there's going to be a large mob with pitchforks outside your door in a moment, because I believe this movie was shot on film but intended for video. So there's that. So
keep an eye out.
Yeah, but we call those pipe bomb people on our podcast, and we were always careful when we open the mail.
Yes. Well,
After
you
a
should be.
spicy take.
Yeah. Make sure you're looking over your shoulder
Okay.
whenever you leave the house. But also, two things of note that I forgot Pino Donaggio scored that I just looked back now and I was like, oh, yes, of course, that's them. Joe Dante's Piranha from
Oh
1978
yeah, that
and
makes a lot of sense.
the amazing Don't Look Now.
Yes, the Nicholas
Oh.
Roeg film, one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. Yeah, absolutely. And that's
I
not
think I might have to add
Miles
both
Dylan's
of
death.
those to my
Yeah.
Halloween playlist this year.
Yes,
The movies and the scores. Why not?
Yeah, do it. Well, do we have anything else to say about Backlash Oblivion 2?
I think I got to just say this turtle situation was
Great turtle.
my favorite kind of reveal.
Yeah.
There's a couple of good reveals, like honestly, and I'm embarrassed to say this as a writer, so I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. The reveal that it was Miss Kitty that was the corporate espionage person. I was 100% sure it was Maddie. I was like, it's totally Maddie. That's why she's so DTF, like, because she's like actually a woman of the world or of the galaxy, blah blah blah. And then when it's Miss Kitty, I was like, oh, you idiot! Of course it's Miss Kitty, like, you know. But
I am
there you
so happy to hear you say that because I was embarrassed to say that on microphone.
Yeah.
Like I had the same exact thing. It was a misdirect that actually worked.
It totally worked
on me, and I was like, "Wow, okay, that was."
So in a movie with that
surprised.
kind of level of misdirection taking place, or Sweeney being revealed to be a hideous monster,
Great
you know,
reveal.
when we get the reveal that the cave is actually inside some sort of orifice of this giant space turtle, like, I don't know, guys. That's great stuff. That's good
great.
fucking writing. And then the fact that we're like, we gotta toot sweet. We need to wrap this up. So what are we gonna do with Jagar and Lash now that they're free? I don't know. They get squished by this giant turtle. Oh, works for me. Moving on. You know, it's just like,
yeah.
it was so. And then I had all these thoughts of like, is that how Miss Kitty survived the cave collapse in? Which, you know, when the cave collapses and she seemingly dies, was she just like later like excreted or expelled from some other orifice of the turtle? You know, like so my mind was going in all these places because of this reveal. It added like layers and layers of stuff for me to chew on after the fact, which is what I love about these types of movies. They give you the opportunity to like chew the fat later. And talk about it with people like we're doing right now, you know.
Yeah, what I realized watching this was that Jordan Peele ripped this off with the whole notion that the spaceship is the creature.
Right.
Totally. Jordan Peele, you're on notice.
Yeah. See that it doesn't happen again, young man.
Yeah. Oh, it will. Don't worry.
No, I had I'm totally kidding. No disrespect to Jordan Peele. I think it's just something entirely different, and it was a super cool idea that he had with Nope, with the jean jacket being the actual creature, and a totally different
I actually
design.
legitimately like that movie a lot. I know. I feel like you told me you were not such a crazy.
I didn't like it the first time I watched it, but I don't think it was. It had less to do with the movie itself than it had to do with my expectation of what I thought the movie was going to be.
Yeah, marketing can be a real problem for movies like that sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I walked in expecting one thing. It gave me something completely different, and I was kind of miffed initially. And then I sat with it for a little while and thought about it and revisited it once and was kind of like, okay, it's not going to be up there in my favorite movies, but I can appreciate what's being done in a lot of the places, and I think a lot of it is more successful than I was willing to give it credit for.
It grows. It definitely grows, and it's very narratively experimental in ways that you don't see in like mainstream studio movies like that. And I appreciated that. I love that movie. It
does something. I got a couple. I mean, I know we're not talking about that movie, but like, I'm a big UFO guy. This is just who I am. So this is, you know, I've come to terms with this. So when I went into the movie, and I've seen a lot of UFO movies and abduction movies and stuff like that, I'm well versed in that mythology. So when I saw when they made the twist and the turn in that movie, I was like, okay, here we go, because you know I kind of thought I knew what I was going to get, and so I was pleasantly surprised. Then another thing I think is very successful about that movie is that by the time when the film ends and you look back on the first 5 minutes, it's all right there for you.
Yeah,
and when a movie can do that, when the first 3 pages of the script or 5 pages of the script completely forecast the entire movie in a way that isn't actually just giving it away, like that's some very nice, clean writing, and so I had to respect that as an aspiring screenplay writer myself. So yeah, no disrespect to Mr. Peele. He's doing good stuff. Not
sure
Oblivion too good, but
Hey,
yeah, everybody's got to start somewhere.
we'll all get there eventually.
Yes.
Yeah, he's he's doing his thing out there at least, which is still refreshing amidst all of the corporate legacy sequels that are
Jesus,
being
yeah.
hoisted upon us, which is a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
But no, Oblivion 2 is a lot of fun. I mean, I think I got a lot of things I wanted, which was a snappier pace, more Musetta Vander, more Julie Newmar, which were the things I really liked about it. And I think I found
less potato.
There is less
which is-
potato.
it's honestly
there's
probably for the
less
best.
brown face. Yeah, less
Yeah.
brown face is always good.
Yeah, less Pateo in this movie, but there were things like I feel like in the first movie I kind of shrugged off Richard Joseph Paul and felt like he fell into that trap that happens with full moon male leads sometimes where they are kind of bland comparatively, and I felt like he had more personality this time. My biggest gripe would be I want more Divoff,
Mm-hmm.
but I think
Yeah.
we had the right amount and maybe a little more Meg Foster.
Yeah, but again,
I
you
think-
could see there being like a Divoff episode later.
Yep.
Right. And then there'll be a Stell episode later on, and there'll be whatever the next brother to Red Eye and
Yep.
Jagger is. And like Maddie's character had some fun moments here, but I feel like she by design, I think, is kind of vanilla compared to
She's a bit of a wet blanket, yeah.
compared to Miss Kitty, and especially compared to Lash.
She's just a piece, like a magnet that you can flip to push the other magnets away or pull them towards each other. She just sort of is there to move Sweeney and the Marshal. And
yeah, but I have nothing but good grace toward Oblivion as a property and as a concept that they were putting out at that time. Like we mentioned we had Sam Urban on the show for an interview. Not too long, maybe like a month or month and a half after we had recorded the episode with you. So I feel like Oblivion was pretty fresh. We knew we weren't going to get to the sequel for a while. And Sam talked a lot about the production of both of those movies. And I had the pleasure of meeting him in person about 9 months ago, maybe, which was really cool because, it's like we had done this interview and, remained friends on social media. And so then to get to talk to him in person and I Was a Teenage Werewolf Monster Hunter, I believe it's called. I Was a Teenage Monster Hunter book is amazing. If you want to talk about his relationship with Universal horror and Hammer horror and all of the tropes of these specific subgenres and how he kind of incorporates them into this movie. Really fascinating. He's had an amazing life. And I just think he was the right person to bring the right energy to this project. And I know I'm kind of excited to watch some of the Moonbeam movies that he made because I feel like they're like Ted Nicolau. Some of them are pretty well regarded. And I know he spent the majority of his latter career doing a lot of kind of Hallmark and Christmas movies and stuff like that. But I think he was doing some interesting work here. I mean, he is the first. Isn't he the first person we see in the movie who gets shot by Lash? He takes out the cigarette.
Oh, that is a great little sequence, by the way.
Yeah.
The Stogie bites it, spits it, blowtorch, immediately shot. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was Sam Urban who took the bullet there from Lash,
Perfect.
and then we get a little "those things will kill you" and a gun spin, and I think it was that scene is sort of a microcosm of the whole thing where it really set the tone. This is going to be silly, it's going to be campy, it's going to be funny, and it's going to have that syndicated show feel. And I was here for it. I had a lot of fun with this one, probably a little more fun even than I had with the first one, and found myself disappointed that we do have no more adventures in Oblivion for now.
Yeah, really. It feels like we could. Yeah.
Absolutely. But we really appreciate Dylan coming back here to talk about the close out the saga with us. It's been a blast talking to you about Oblivion. Where can people find all of your stuff, your podcast, your writing, all of that?
Well, let's see. Let's start with the podcast. You can find Barstool Film School wherever you get your podcasts. We are on season 2, which means we're focusing on sequels this season. Yeah. And weirdly enough, sort of the shittier the sequel, like the worse the movie, the more it seems to pass our grading rubric that we have for whether or not it makes for a good bar movie, because a lot of it just revolves around just capturing your attention for better or for worse. So we've covered some great films this season. We've got one coming out pretty soon on Shrek 2. That was a weirdly fun conversation. We did Evil Dead 2 this season with a local radio DJ friend of ours. that is a solid bar movie and great movie just all around. So that's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
So check that out if that sounds like fun for you. And we always have a craft cocktail that's paired with the picture. It's mixed up by my co-host, who's a bar owner and knows a little bit about mixing delicious cocktails. I just drink them, but he makes them. And then you could find any of my books. You could find them on Amazon, or you could ask your local bookseller to go out and procure them for you. I suggest the latter, because let's help these people out. They're doing the Lord's work. And yeah, you can find out how to spell my weird name probably from the show notes for this very show.
It will be spelled correctly, I hope.
Yeah, and we look forward to, the optioning of your series. So that's something really exciting in the near future. But if you want to buy any of Dylan's books or listen to Barstool Film School and check out what they've got going on, I'm sure you're really going to enjoy it. And if you enjoy the content that we bring to you every single week, then you can jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Drop us a little 5-star rating, maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined. It's just a great way for the show to continue to reach a wider audience. If you want to keep up with us and see what we're doing and what's coming up, you can follow us on our social media on a lot of different platforms. You can follow the show on Instagram at puppetmasters_castlefreaks. You can follow me at _Giallo_Jerry, or Steve at Minotaur Matador. You will see promo posts for the show on X, unfortunately, still. On Threads, and also you can listen to audio versions of the show with a thumbnail on our YouTube channel, which we say every week we will eventually start adding new content to that isn't just the audio form. But for now, that is a way to hear it, and there's a surprising amount of people who actually consume it that way. But we are
you guys
not
need an animator. Hey, animators.
Hey,
you guys want to draw fun pictures of Steve and Jared just like talking about these movies?
Absolutely, that is.
Do you want to do it for free?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's the important part.
That's the important one.
But there is not only Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks content out there if you enjoy hearing Steve's voice. Steve, what else have you got going on that you want to plug?
Oh, I've got a ton of stuff. One of them is the Cinemarcade podcast. That's the podcast where we are watching movies and then playing video games based on those movies to compare, contrast, and see how they enhance or detract from one another.
Can I ask you a question, Steve?
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but I have to know. I played a game back in the day that was it was a video game adaptation of The Fifth Element. Is this one you're familiar with?
We just released our episode of The Fifth Element a few weeks ago with my friend Jeremy Moran, who came on to talk about that.
I gotta hear it.
Yeah, great movie, a lot of fun movie, big fun movie. Boy, that game, that
weird. I remember it being kind of odd and being like, I don't know, is this really the same thing?
That's a game that did not age well. Let's say early PlayStation games do not really hold up today. But that's one man's opinion. But we just recorded an episode, maybe our most contentious one ever, about the Goonies. So be sure to tune into that one and be prepared to send angry letters at me. But also be prepared to come back next week. You'll have no need for angry letters because we are talking about two films back in the Torchlight universe. That's right. That's the
going back to Torchlight Town,
nudity-filled silliness. The studio responsible for Beach Babes from Beyond and movies of such ilk. We're going to be talking about the movie Blonde Heaven and Huntress, Spirit of the Night. Two great titles, two early Torchlight films that would have been basic cable classics for the early ages of Skinamax. For people who have fond memories of that era, we're going to be revisiting it once again. So join us for that. Blonde Heaven and Huntress, Spirit of the Night.
Yeah, it's always fun when we get an opportunity to go back to Torchlight Town. So make sure, listeners, that you come back next week and check out that episode, and that you check out all of Dylan James Quarles' writing, and we will see you next time.